Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Backlog Bunker. I know it's been a while, and that's kind of my fault. It's like half and half, because I did forget last week, but even if I had remembered, I was busy anyway, so it wouldn't really have mattered. Besides, it might have been a blessing in disguise, because it would have meant that I was talking about the same game for 2 weeks straight. Well, same games. The only things I really played are Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Fire Emblem Blazing Blade. And to talk about 7 Rebirth first, because I have more things to say about that, remember how when I was talking about 7 Remake and how it had a lot of AAA-isms that I really didn't like? Well, Rebirth is that, except if it tripled down on everything. More walk and talks, more fake gameplay, more wall shimmies. If you thought it was boring and slow and stupid in Remake, well guess what? There's twice as much of it in Rebirth. Since there was actually a pretty big gap between when I started Rebirth and when I got back to playing it now, I actually hadn't gotten to the part of the game where you unlock the worst AAA part, which is the Ubisoft Towers. If I didn't believe that the 7 Remake project was made by a bunch of hack frauds before, I definitely believe it now. Who was looking at the original Final Fantasy VII and was like, you know what this game needs? An overworld that takes 5 times as long to get through, and Ubisoft Towers that just spawn a bunch of random bullshit on your map. It's funny how experiencing a bad thing can put other bad things into perspective, because, as a reminder, I didn't like Final Fantasy VII. I am not a fan of that game. But something I had never considered even thinking about praising before was the fact that its overworld is really quick to get around. By the time I got to the end of Final Fantasy VII, I knew where to get to everywhere on the map just by memory. Except for Cosmo Canyon, I kept kind of losing that one. But otherwise, I knew it like the back of my hand, because it's all very compact, which is a good thing, because it means that you spend less time doing the boring stupid bullshit you don't care about, and more time playing the video game. The biggest case in point is that, again, I didn't like Final Fantasy VII, but I did a lot of that game's side content just because it was quick to get to, and I thought, why not? On the other hand, I got to that Ubisoft Tower in 7 Rebirth, saw all the bullshit it put on my map, and I said, nope, absolutely not. I just spent 5 minutes holding forward on the left stick just to get to this tower. You want me to spend 5 minutes doing it again in a different direction? And this wouldn't be such a bad thing if the side content was actually good. But what I learned from getting 100% in 7 Remake is that these people are not good at making side content. That's number one. And number two is that from the side content that I actually have done in Rebirth so far, it's all terrible. Have you ever been playing a video game and wished, really desperately, that you could, after 5 or so minutes of walking, walk up to a crystal and then hit triangle 3 times, and then watch a cutscene, and occasionally have a twinkish robot character tell you some bullshit you don't really care about? Cause man, a Rebirth has got you covered. The pressing triangle 3 times thing is a thing I would roll my eyes at if it happened once, but the game asks you to do this multiple times. It's not like the rhythm or anything changes either, it is literally the exact same sequence of pressing triangle 3 times every single time you go to one of these crystals. Once you've done one, you've done them all, and so now I don't want to do any. I'm sorry, Chadley, but I don't want to collect 50 billion intel points so that you can upgrade my Spider-Man PS4 skill tree. Though at least that skill tree wasn't insulting enough to include things that are like, increased damage done by 3%. If it takes 3 sword swings to kill a guy, a 3% damage increase is not going to decrease the number of sword swings that it takes to kill a guy, so the damage increase doesn't actually do anything. So as to not just go on a rant about AAA games in general, the point that I'm trying to make here is that Rebirth is filled with a bunch of fucking busy work, and it's all bad. How can I confidently say that it's all bad despite the fact that I'm like, what, 10% through the game if even? Because I don't trust these fuckers. This is the same team that took like a 30-hour RPG and turned it into 3 games of collectively almost 100 hours. Who knows how long the third part will be? God, and they're not even subtle about the way they stretch things out anymore. Because remember the Midgar Sommer from the original Final Fantasy VII? The fight you have to skip over because it's too strong for you? Now it's just an actual boss fight. Sephiroth shows up in everything, and I clapped. And then remember how after the Midgar Sommer, you go into a cave and it's like, what, 4 or 5 rooms at most? And then you see the Turks there, and then you leave? Well now, the cave itself has to be an entire dungeon with a boss dedicated specifically to Barret and Red, followed by an entire boss fight with the Turks. And then, because no one played the original Final Fantasy VII, of course, we have to insert Yuffie into the story by replacing her with Priscilla in the original. And look guys, I love Yuffie. Her DLC was probably my favorite part of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that was a scam. But what I don't want are longer cutscenes, a worse story, and only, what, a third of a game I might have otherwise enjoyed? Just for it to be half as long and twice as shallow. At least Queen's Blood is fun. Moving on to Fire Emblem, which I have far less to say about, it's really standard so far, which is disappointing because obviously I like Awakening a lot, but clearly none of the things I really like about this series came from any game but Awakening. I've said this to people before, but I've realized the more I play Fire Emblem games that I'm not really a Fire Emblem fan, I'm more of a fan of Fire Emblem Awakening specifically. It has all the characters I like, it has all the mechanics I like, it has a bunch of maps that I like. Hell, it has a UI that I like, which is something I cannot say about any Fire Emblem pre-Radiant Dawn, and also Echoes, and Three Houses to an extent. The point being, I don't really like a lot of Fire Emblem, I'm finding out. Blazing Blade is a fine game, but as far as tactical RPGs go, I have all my guys, and then I put them in front of other guys, and then they hit those guys until I win the game. Now, the way they set up those guys can be kinda tough, and I do appreciate that about the game, that is giving me a decent challenge, but outside of that, there's not really anything for me to sink my teeth into here. Do I specifically mean the game needs an outer gameplay loop like Awakening has? No, not necessarily, but at the same time, the only two tactical RPGs that I really love are Fire Emblem Awakening, which has an outer gameplay loop, and XCOM 2, which has an outer gameplay loop. So, you know. And to try and make up for having missed a week, let's just do 2 weekly topics, cause fuck it, right? Firstly, Friendslop. What is it? What does it do? I consider myself to be a bit of a Friendslop connoisseur, because I got on Among Us when it was ripe back in 2020. Then beyond that, I've even played games like Unfortunate Spacemen, which you've probably never even heard of. And I can tell you that when a game is meant for being played with friends, and it's good, it's just a good game. I don't really play Among Us anymore, but I can tell you that I think Among Us is a good game. I can't speak for any of the maps they've added since I played it. I didn't even think Airship was that good when I played. But the point is, I think the game's really good. Unfortunate Spacemen is a lot like Among Us, but is A, more involved, and B, isn't really about social deduction, and is more about, like, social horror. It doesn't really matter whether or not you deduce that your friend is the imposter, because if you find out your friend is the imposter, now you have to fight them off with a gun. For a much more recent example, I think Peak is a really fun game. However, this does not mean that Friendslop doesn't exist, because you can actually pretty easily find out which games are Friendslop and which games are, you know, video games. The golden rule is basically this. When you see a game get announced, you can tell that it's Friendslop if the thing that entices you about it is the concept and not the potential. The concept of Peak is pretty straightforward. It's a game where you climb a mountain, but the potential is all the funny things that can happen while you climb the mountain. Unfortunate Spacemen is a half social deduction, half action game. The things you actually get fun out of are the things that happen in the game. Among Us is about as basic as it gets when it comes to social deduction. These games that I have named here are all video games. Even ones that I haven't played, like Lethal Company for example, the concept is pretty straightforward. You have to go into a fucking thing and collect a bunch of loot, but the fun stuff happens while you collect the loot. Now alternatively, let's turn our attention to that one fucking game that just got announced, with you have to go into a mansion and you have to shit yourself and you have to find a toilet with your friends or something. That is a game trying to blow up on its concept, and that is a game that I don't think anyone deserves to care about. Even games that I don't like Phasmophobia, are real video games, just real video games I think are bad. But I'd rather see millions of people singing the praises of a bad video game before I even see one person sing the praises of a slop video game. And for the other weekly topic, Crowbcat made another Resident Evil 4 video. Wow! Now normally I wouldn't really care about this, because fun fact, I didn't even watch his original Resident Evil 4 remake video, because I didn't care at the time. But 2 facts have changed that have caused me to give this video a watch and really end up liking it. Number 1 is that I hate remakes way more now, a thing that I've made no secret on this channel. And number 2 is that my perspective on gaming discourse has changed a little bit. The way to put it most succinctly would basically be that you don't always have to have an opinion on something, sometimes you just have to notice. Crowbcat does not speak in any of his videos, he doesn't even really use text all that much. But I think it would be a fair guess to say that he probably doesn't like the Resident Evil 4 remake all that much. And you might come to this conclusion based on the fact that in the footage that you can see, things are not the same in both games. Now that footage by itself does not factually prove that 4 or remake is better than one or the other. However, it is something to notice. Maybe you didn't have a problem with Resident Evil 4's audio, but I think it's very interesting that a lot of streamers started playing the game and then went, huh, this is too low, that's weird. I know that the nooticing is a meme and all that, but genuinely, sometimes it pays off to just be observant. I've mentioned it many times on this channel, times that I've seen people say one thing and then turn around and end up saying the other. I don't need to call anyone a hypocrite, I just need to put those 2 sentences next to each other and let them speak for themselves. And that's essentially how I feel about Crowbcat's videos. He puts the footage there, and it speaks for itself. And if you come to a different conclusion, then it's literally impossible for you to agree with him, because you and he see 2 different realities, which is a thing I wish more people would accept about discourse online. Like if I'm talking to someone, and they think that all the padding in Final Fantasy VII Remake is good, then I can just be like, hey, you're subhuman cattle, and that's fine. Goodbye. And speaking of goodbyes, that's it for this one. Get out of here.